In this hands-on lab nugget, I want to get you up and close and personal with a blade server. Blade servers are incredibly cool and they're the rage today because we don't want a data center, and a data center is a place where we're going to store a ton of information or services. We don't want the traditional servers sitting there on the shelves taking up a lot of power and adding a lot of weight to the equation and consuming a lot of heat or throwing off a lot of heat, so they consume a lot of air conditioning to keep the traditional type of servers running. What we do is we shrink the server down, and we can, in this case, put it inside a chassis. Look at this. Here you can see the edges of the chassis, and you can see that we would have 3 big bolts on each side to mount this into a rack. Then inside the chassis, there are 4 power supplies to power the many servers that we can put inside this chassis. Notice on this one, we have 1 server here, a 2nd server here, a 3rd here, a 4th here, a 5th here taking up the entire width of the chassis, and a 6th that's taking up the entire width. So there are 6 servers in this very, very small space in what we call the chassis that they lock right into. You can see these little levers here that would allow you to slide these servers out of the chassis if we needed to do some like maintenance or repair. And now let's get, like I said, really up close and personal with one of these things. What I'll do is I'll come down here and I'll slide out one of the devices so you can see it. So I'm going to pull up the features list here, and I'm going to take out the UCS B200M2 out of this chassis. Watch this. So we're going to undo the latch, and we're going to slide that blade server out of the chassis, and then we're going to peel off the lid. Now, when we zoom in and look at this device, you're going to see that it is extremely powerful. Just because this server is so small, don't think for a second that it's going to lack power. Look at all of the RAM that we could put in this machine. So we can see the RAM slots right here. If I go down here, as a matter of fact, I bet you it'll even tell us how much RAM we could insert. So up to 96 gigs of DDR3 memory can be supported. Notice in this half-width form factor. This is one of those blade servers that only takes up half the width of the chassis that we saw. How about CPUs? We can install up to 2 Intel Xeon Series 5500 processors or 5600 processors. So here you have this extremely small server, ridiculously small, and it has more power than a huge traditional server system that I might have at home. Now you notice when we did this animation, something really interesting happened. In fact, let me replay the animation. And they're going to peel off the lid so we can see inside it. And then they move a card so we can see underneath the card. What is that card that they're moving? Well, it sits up above the rest of the device, just above the motherboard on the device. So we call this style of card a mezzanine card. How interesting. What is a mezzanine? Well, if you walk into like a mall, you might see this layer sticking out of the mall with people looking down at you. Hi, everybody. So that layer of the mall is called the mezzanine. It's like a little floor above you. And that's exactly what this card does. Now, cards are not going to have traditional slots in here. What is typically done is PCIe. So the PCI standard, and we'll discuss that in other nuggets with you where we discuss expansion cards. Just remember, it's PCIe mezzanine style cards that we would insert, and there's not going to be a lot of room for them. Typically 2 in servers that are this small. Obviously, you don't have a lot of room for expansion when you're dealing with this type of a form factor. I wanted you to see this though, because these are going to be extremely popular in data centers of today because of the power that we can pack into a very, very small space. So what does this look like when we get it all together? Well, it would look like this. And I just realized I need to draw this a bit to scale. So here I am. Hi, everybody. That's the second time I've said that in this nugget. So there I am standing next to these racks of equipment, and you can see there's those UCS chassis. They are stacked one on top of the other in this rack on the far left. Notice right here in this rack, we are dealing with storage equipment. I can identify that as the storage, the raw storage for all this computing power over here just by the form factor, just by how those pieces of equipment look. So you get the idea. We can install many different servers in a very small space when we take advantage of this blade server technology. One more point I wanted to make to you is that blade servers don't have to go into one of these chassis. So you can have a blade server like right here that just slides into the rack and doesn't have to be housed inside of a chassis like we looked at in this nugget. Something else that I want to make clear to you, and that's just really kind of really mind-blowing about all this, is we would use virtualization heavily in this environment. Think about this. So right here in the UCS chassis, and UCS is a Cisco term for Unified Computing System, and we're just using them as an example in this nugget. There are plenty of other blade server manufacturers out there other than Cisco. I just chose Cisco because I have a little bias, as I have expertise in these particular devices. So anyways, if you look at one of these little physical blade servers that's stuck in the chassis, you realize that it can be virtualized with virtualization software like VMware, and it can be running, let's say 25 Windows Server operating systems. So in one little blade server, and we might have, let's say, 8 of them inside the overall chassis, each of those devices could be running like 25 instances of Windows. 8 times 25, let's see, my daughter and I do math every night. I think that's 40, and that's 16. That's 200 instances of Windows Server running in a very small space. Remarkable when we consider how we would have to run 200 Windows servers in years past. Well, I sure hope you had a fraction of the fun that I had in this hands-on lab nugget where we went to the future and we looked at the blade server. And when I say the future, I mean right now, because people are moving their data centers to blade servers left and right, and that's why I thought this was such a critical component of this CompTIA A+ course here at CBT Nuggets. I sure hope you found this nugget informative, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.